Welcome to The Machine, a podcast from Waterford Institute of Technology. My name is Rob O'Connor. I'm a lecturer in the Department of Computing and Mathematics, and today we are talking about teaching kids to code. It is EU Code Week, starts on the 5th of October, which for us is tomorrow. Wherever you're listening from, it could be yesterday, it could be today, it could be a year ago, who knows. Such are the vagaries of time travel and podcasts. Anyway, on the panel today we have Frank Walsh.
Hello.
We have Brenda Mullally.
Hello.
We have Siobhan and Drohan.
Hello.
The three of those are also faculty members here in Waterford Institute of Technology, also in the Computing and Maths Department, also known as the Fun Department. But we also have Kate Warren, who is the Deputy Principal of Gaelscoil Port Lairge in Ballygunner in Waterford, and she's also a tech advocate and has been doing some of the activities with some of the lads here with the kids in her school. So hello to you, Kate.
Dig Patron.
I have no idea what you're saying.
Hi, Rob.
Good Tobin. Is that right? No. Nos na Guiha, Níléon Hinton mar Hinton Homestead, or something like that. Okay, so what we're going to do is talk about teaching kids to code. What are the approaches that somebody could take? We've all been involved in different aspects of this, particularly with young people, like very young people from primary school age, secondary school age. Not really talking about kind of third level students here. We're talking about people much younger. Talk about some projects, and maybe we might even delve into the deeper question is, should we teach kids to code? And I'm not sure if we'll have an answer to that, but we'll find out. We might get into it anyway. So maybe we'll start with the first thing about maybe some of our own experiences with working with some kids and teaching some coding. So Siobhan, you're mad to get going on this.
Oh yeah, I am. Yeah, definitely.
Well, no, because this came from last week.
Yeah.
Yourself and Brenda did a little demo of for other members of the faculty of some gear that you had been putting together and some little projects that you'd been putting together.
And all of that gear that we were using is kit that we were using out in the Gaelscoil with Coit. So we would have used, we would have first gone out there and started doing Hour of Code. And it's great. The Hour of Code is great for giving them the idea of block coding. So you move little blocks across and you get a character to move on the screen. And it's great for the first hour, and they get the idea of how a block of code gets the character to do something. Maybe they're getting it to repeat something or, move 10 paces on the screen. But after 1 hour, after doing it for an hour, they're ready to move on to something else. And we could see it in the kids. They wanted more. So what we did then was we bought Spheros. So
so maybe describe what a Sphero is.
Sphero, right? There's loads of different types of Spheros. If you type Sphero, SPHEREO, isn't it? Yeah.
Just
yeah. Into the. Did I spell it right?
It's close enough.
Yeah. Google will fix it. Yeah. But yeah, if you type Sphero in, you'll see that there's many different types of Spheros out there.
It's a little robot.
It's a little robot, and we bought them. We bought the small ones called the Sphero Mini, and it's a robot, and it's the size of a ping pong ball. And what you can do is you can use some sort of a handheld device like an iPad, even a Kindle, an Android device, your phone, and you can connect to that robot through Bluetooth, and you can get it to do things like move, turn, change colours. And what we used to do was get them to move around maps on the floor. So they'd figure out the angle that they had to turn at and how long they had to drive to get to the end of a corner, and then they'd have to move again. So they learnt a lot in doing that, driving the Sphero around a map. We'll put up a picture of the maps actually on Twitter so you can get an idea if you're interested in it.
Great, yeah.
And so we moved on to those, and then we did that with a couple of the classes. We did it with 3rd class, 4th class
and
5th class.
So maybe could you just say what age would these kids be?
I'll let Coit do that.
So 9 to 11-year-olds.
9 to 11-year-olds,
Yeah.
okay, yeah.
Yeah. And we did the Spheros, and then we saw a video on Makeys. And these things were just brilliant. So once again, you can use it with your iPads, you can use it with normal machines, kind of MacBook, anything. Normal machines, computers, normal computers. And what it is it's a little kind of a breadboard thing that you connect through USB port onto your computer or your iPad, and it bypasses the mouse and the keyboard. And what you do then is you've got this little board that has loads of holes in it, and you use crocodile clips to connect to anything that conducts electricity. So you then create a circuit by earthing that, and all you do is earth it, is just hold on to part of that breadboard, and you can get whatever you've connected that makey to react to whatever it is on the screen. So we had things like a game of Scratch that was kind of a drum kit. So if you press the up key, it plays one particular drum, snare drum. If you press the left key, it does another thing. So what they were doing was connecting these to Play-Doh. And they were typing on the Play-Doh and they were playing the drums using Play-Doh.
So I'm gonna back up there a few, because we've introduced an awful lot of phrases and concepts here that might sound a bit weird, like breadboard, crocodile clips, typing on Play-Doh. That sounds a bit weird. It's so the makey is it's like a little circuit, a little chip.
Yeah.
So when you say breadboard, you mean an electronics breadboard, not something that you would actually cut your fresh loaf on. You know.
Yeah, that's
you could do that, but it wouldn't be a good idea.
It'd be a very small loaf because they're tiny.
Yeah, and then what you've got, these crocodile clips they're like little wires that, if we could describe, they're like little crocodile's teeth on them, but they look like a clothes peg for all intents and purposes.
And it's metal. Yeah.
And they make a little circuit. And when you say it's a keyboard, what that's actually doing is this is pretending to be a keyboard, but instead what you're wiring up the action of tapping on a piece of Play-Doh or a banana or a potato or whatever it is to an up key. So it's sending keystrokes to the computer, but instead of an actual keyboard, it's
Play-Doh.
a physical device. Yes.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
That's exactly it. So, and there was other things, like we made a piano keyboard out of bananas. So they played with the bananas as if they were playing a keyboard, and they loved that, didn't they? Yeah. And there was games of, we did a Simon game. Remember the game years ago?
Simon Says.
Simon, yeah.
Simon, is that the colours thing?
The colours, yeah.
So describe that, how that works.
So basically, that game from years ago would have been a handheld electronic game that would have played a sequence of colours, and you have to remember them. It's like a memory game. So they play red first, and you have to hit the red, and then they'll play red, green, and then you hit red, green, and you have to remember the sequence. Then it'd be red, green, blue, and you have to hit red, green, blue, and it'd just keep going for as long as you could go till you get the sequence wrong. And we built that with the Makeys. We connected them to the iPads and connected it to the right coloured Play-Doh. So they actually had a Play-Doh version of the game connected through the Makey using their iPads.
So some of the kids actually made the Play-Doh into the shapes of the old one. So they made little quadrants, really, didn't they, out of the Play-Doh in the correct colours. And they had made their own little game.
So you, in terms of coding though, this is, you're using a Scratch environment on the iPad, but then it's linked up to some physical hardware that you're making out of Play-Doh or bananas,
Exactly.
or whatever.
Yep. And those Scratch games, you can find those on, there's loads of projects out there that you can use, or you can write them yourself. So you've got two different avenues that you can go with the class. If you want to teach them coding, you can get them to write their own games. Or if you aren't familiar with coding yourself and want to use this, you don't need to have coding experience. You just look for the game that you want and you can connect it all up.
So maybe we might go to Brenda now, because Brenda, you might describe, we've talked about Scratch. Somebody might think Scratch is where you're actually just like using your fingernails, or it's, you know, off a scratch pad might be something where you just put in things. Scratch is an actual kind of computing programming environment. And could you maybe describe what that is and where it came from?
So it's very much an interactive environment, which is like Windows, and it has drag and drop features. So it allows a younger age group and those older to get used to creating, I suppose, a program by just selecting options. So whether it's setting some variables, so in the Sphero, let's say, the little round robots, if we want to send it in a particular direction, we can do that by setting a variable for direction, for movement, for speed, for time. And it's simply dragging a movement object into the kind of work area, and you can keep adding parts to it. So they're called blocks, and you end up with a complete program, and you then press play essentially, and it works through the program to create this interactivity with the robot. And at any stage you can press stop and bring the robot back to the beginning, let's say, of the map, make adjustments and try again. So it's very naturally intuitive for kids as well. They're used to clicking and choosing options in drop-down lists and using the mouse or their finger in touch to move these blocks around. They don't see any text code. That's all hidden behind the scenes, which you can show them maybe towards the end if they have interest or they get to that stage. But it's a very simple environment that doesn't feel complex or difficult.
And it's quite cartoony, and I don't mean
Yes.
that in a negative way, in that it's the roundy edges. There's Scratch the cat is the kind of the logo who's always
Characters,
there.
yeah,
they've-
yeah. And you have sound music that you can bring in, and the games are appropriate for the age group, the ideas that are used in them, and it's colourful. Yeah, so they enjoy it. They enjoy using that as a tool.
And there's lots of versions of Scratch. Now, Frank, you have been working with CodeDojo for a
Yes.
number of years, and we might get to the Coder. Actually, we might as well do it now. Could you maybe explain what CodeDojo is for the uninitiated?
Right, so CodeDojo is a global network of coding clubs. It's volunteer-led, it's community-based. And in fact, it started here in Ireland, I think about 6 or 7 years ago. So from that one club down in Cork, I think globally now there's hundreds of CodeDojo clubs, and they're completely free for kids. As I said, it's volunteer-led. When a CodeDojo starts up, we look for volunteers, and when the kids come along, they can come into the CodeDojo. They don't have to bring anything with them. It costs them nothing. It's completely free. And then they can learn how to code. And in fact, we use a lot, as Brenda was talking about, their Scratch generally when they come into us. They'll start working with Scratch straight away.
I think that's the important thing. Scratch and many of its variants are all free. You can either use it directly in the browser or download it to your computer or tablet or whatever, which is important. Again, barriers to entry and all of that. So CodeDojo, though, is not something that's directly in the schools.
No.
It's a separate kind of like a club that somebody might join of a Saturday.
It's a separate thing. Usually what happens, it runs once a week. There's lots of dojos around Ireland at the moment. What they need really is just for somebody to champion it. And in Tramore, I'm in CodeDojo in Tramore. We're 5 years old. And back then it was myself and another lady called Karen McCarthy. We started it up, and we just put a message out via social media looking for interest and looking for volunteers. I said to you, it's community based, so we really rely on businesses in the community and businesses around Waterford to give us stuff. So for instance, we look for a place to kind of hold the CodeDojo, and luckily enough so far we've been able to get various locations, whether it be a hotel or the race course in Tramore, and usually we get it for free because we're community based, and that's what we look for. And then we go to companies, they'll give us computers, they might sponsor us to buy equipment. So like Siobhan was saying there, we were able to buy equipment. We have a Sphero, we have Raspberry Pis. We could talk about that in a while, but we have various bits of equipment that the kids can use. And we like that because, as I said to you, there should be no barrier to entry for kids to come into us. They can bring their own kit if they want, their own laptops, but if they don't have them, that's not a problem. We can give it to them, and then we, the volunteers, will help them to learn to code.
Yeah, no, I'm involved in the CodeDojo as well over in Dunmore. We're smaller TE, and we're based in the sailing club. Again, very thankful to the sailing club because they just give us the space for free, and as long as we tidy up after ourselves, it's all good, which we do. We're very good like that. But what we're talking about there, though, is we've talked about CodeDojo, which is a kind of an international group that somebody might get involved with. But what's interesting about what, say, Brenda and Siobhan and Kate have been doing is that you're actually doing this directly in the schools. And this is not part of a kind of a formal program, is it? This is just something that you have just done because you're interested. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is correct. Siobhan was one of the parents in my class. She was one of my parents, and we were both interested. We've known each other years, it has to be said as well, and we were both interested in this, both a bit nerdy or whatever. And
but you're not a technical person. You're not a computer programmer.
Oh gosh, no. And actually, I had never done any kind of coding before. Siobhan said to me, would you be up for doing this? And I said, yeah, I'd love it. I mean, I'll always embrace all kinds of new technology and everything. And so when she came in, I saw exactly how easy it was. And there's really nothing to fear as a teacher. I embraced it because here I had this WIT lecturer coming in to help me with it. But when I saw it, I actually thought, you know what, even if Siobhan can't make it in, I can continue on with this. I actually discovered that we had Sphero robots in our house that I didn't know about. We had a little guy called Ollie, who's made by Sphero. He's cylindrical. and before I realised what we could do with him in terms of coding, we were just working him from an app on the iPad, you know, where you're kind of flicking and pulling and dragging and stuff, and you move him around like that. He does stunts and things. We also had a little BB-8, so the Star Wars character, and he's actually a spherobot, so he is a little sphere, probably about the size of a little bowling ball, or like pétanque or boule, you know, when you play that game. He's like that, and he has a little hemisphere for a head. And so he rolls around every place, and you can just control him from an app, or you can control him from a thing that looks a bit like a wristwatch, or you can actually code him to do exactly what you want. And he can, apart from all the movements, he can actually make noises. And he can make little funny sounds and talk and stuff. So he's pretty cool. So when the kids, when they're first learning the coding, it's nice to have the stuff on the screen, but then they get as far as the little spherobots and they bring them around the maps and things, and then they start discovering just a whole other world. But it's all really, really simple. I mean, I've done all this. And I'm old. But you know what I mean? The kids, you expect the kids to embrace it, because kids are like that nowadays, and you just know that they'll pick up something and they'll work it in the blink of an eye. But it's no problem for older people to pick up either. It's really easy stuff.
So they're all very positive things. But is there any approach that doesn't work in anyone's opinion? So if anyone wants to jump in here with this.
Textbook.
Okay, Brenda, what's that then? What's textbook? I know what textbook is.
I remember learning Visual Basic by a textbook before we even had a lab available.
Right.
But I mean, that was in third level. But I think it has to be interactive. So anything that isn't hands-on, using some kind of device that's a bit fun or exciting, the learning is a little less interesting, I suppose. And so particularly at the younger age group, they get a bit bored quick. So the hour of code is perfect, 1 hour or thereabouts to do it for the younger age group, and that works really well. And continue on with Scratch and so on, because the layout and the view and the look and feel of Scratch is nice and interactive. But if you are doing, I mean, we mentioned it earlier, text, seeing the code or writing the code, I think that slows the process down, or slows the learning down, or doesn't make it as fun or enjoyable. I think learning has changed that much that now in primary school they're used to learning through play and doing fun things and being outdoors and hands-on and more role play and interactivity, and technology delivers that if we bring it into the classroom.
Kate, you want to come in there?
Yeah, I do. Because what Brenda's saying is really true. Learning has changed. And when you're talking about any of the STEM things, you know, we bring our kids to engineering week. They get to build stuff, physically build the things, and therefore problem solve as they're doing so. How do I make it stronger? Well, things have to be triangular. How do I make it, you know, how can I get it taller and still have it a stable structure, and so on and so forth. That's, you know, all the engineering side of things, the design, the problem solving, everything works. Everything goes in better to a child's mind if you can make it concrete. I mean, it's always been the case, even way, way back. Like over 20 years ago in college, we were being taught, you know, use concrete materials when teaching maths. You know, these manipulatives, I think they're called nowadays. We used to just call them concrete materials. And, you know, whether it was counters or dice or, you know, we teach a lot of maths now through board games and various card games and things. And it's all, there's Isaac 9, which is this wonderful maths aid that we've got into our school as well. And things like this. And it all just reinforces everything when kids can actually have that extra level. And the touch and the feel of things. And the problem solving skills, really it comes down to that. In the junior classes, we can code using B-bots, and they're pretty cool little things to introduce it at a very, very early but fun stage.
Could you maybe describe what a B-bot is?
A bee bot is like, it looks like a little bee, except
As in a little honeybee.
a little honeybee, yeah. Which of course we have to look after, and so they're like these little. It's a honeybee, but we'll say where the honeybee has a nice little round belly. These are flat and they have wheels underneath them, and they are they're probably about the size of. Help me out here, Siobhan.
Big tennis ball.
Okay.
A half a tennis ball.
Everything's a tennis ball.
They're about the size of my microphone. So anyway, so it was a big tennis ball, and so the kids they have little buttons on their backs. They are literally yellow and black stripes. So they kind of look like a yellow and black striped ladybird in terms of shape, and they have buttons on their backs which are directional. So the kids can very clearly see straight away that this one will make it move forward, this one will make it move backwards, this will go right, this will go left, and so on. And again, you have little maps, but they're broken up into blocks, so they're kind of grid maps. And the children press the buttons to make them go where they want them to go. And why it's coding is because they have to figure out their sequence first. So they don't just press the button, make him move forward, then press it again, make him move forward again. They have to do a little bit of planning. So if they want to move forward 3 squares and left 2 squares, then they have to press the forward button 3 times. Then they have to turn him 90 degrees to the left, and then they have to press the left button 2 times or whatever. I can't even remember what sequence I said they were doing, but they have to plan it. They have to then press those appropriate buttons, and then they press the go button. And if they haven't planned correctly, or if they haven't pushed in the correct sequence, then he won't go where they want him to go. And the little maps are fun. Like there might be a waterfall on the map. Let's bring him to the park. Let's bring him to the shop. So there are different maps they can use. They make up their own maps. A lot of the teachers design their own things. And so they're great fun to use in schools. And they plan it on whiteboards, these little miniature whiteboards, so they can easily erase what they've done if it's gone wrong. And again, we're back to problem solving.
Which actually, so that's an interesting one there, because we're coming back to that again and again. And I was trying to build up to this, but you've got there before me, so fair play to you. Which is, should we teach kids to code? Because really, is what we want to do is mainly just teach them about problem solving and planning. Yeah, that's a loaded question. Okay, Frank, you're mad to come in there.
But on that question, whether we should, I think it's a good idea to teach kids to code, because inherent in it, there's a lot of transferable skills in there in terms of how you approach a problem, how you break it down. So I mean, problem solving is inherent in coding. You have to be able to do it. You have to perfect it in order to do it properly. So I would think, like, as in should we? I think certainly it should be available to children or to kids to be able to learn to code. And you know yourself from working in here, there's a lot of transferable skills in terms of mathematics, in terms of logical thinking, things like that are just that you will get from learning to code, even if you don't go on to become, I don't know, a developer or a games programmer or whatever, or a website designer. You will still gain something from it, I think.
What are problem solving skills? Now, there's a loaded question for you. No, because you hear it the whole time. Oh, problem solving skills.
Yeah,
but what does that actually mean?
They're
Problem
vital.
solving skills. There's a hole. I filled it. Fix the problem. No, like what?
Okay, well, in my opinion, and it is only my opinion, problem solving skills would be first identifying the problem, doing the necessary research around that problem, and ultimately you want to come up with a solution. But to get there, you're breaking the problem down into different parts, figuring out smaller solutions for those parts, testing those solutions, putting it all together and test the overall solution. I suppose in my mind, that's what problem solving is. And it can be applied to anything. And when we talk about should we teach coding, coding is one method or one way to teach tech that brings in many other aspects like creative thinking and critical thinking. So figuring stuff out, problem solving and innovating and all of those things which are really important for learners now for the future. And it doesn't have to be just coding. You know, you can do many other things, and it's not really, even when you listen to Frank, they're not just coding.
No,
he's right. I know.
It's not just coding. Like he mentioned, other aspects to it, and you're doing lots of iteration of testing and coming up with ideas and solutions, and how can we fix this. That's all involved in the CodeDojo and the coding part, but it's not the only thing.
Siobhan, you wanted to come in as well.
There's just to add on to what Brenda was saying there at the end, that one of the biggest things that I see the first years doing is being able to learn from their mistakes.
So this is the first years on third level.
On third level, but you can see it in anyone who does do coding at any age. It's one of the biggest things is they do learn from their mistakes. They can actually, the more mistakes they make in this field, the better, because the more they learn. And if they don't make mistakes, they don't learn as much as they would. And you know, it's one thing that it encourages them to be aware that it's actually really good to make mistakes and things like this, and to learn from it.
Kate.
There's an article I read actually that was written by a software developer, and he was anti-coding, certainly at an early age. He was saying, you know, there are all these books out there now and everyone's trying to teach coding to preschoolers and kindergartners and all the rest, and we shouldn't do it because what we're taking away is their own ability to problem solve in the real world and their curiosity and so on. So I think he's really looking at the syntax of it and the actual language. And as Brenda said, that's the part where it slows down. The part where the children are actually using the spheros, using the B-bots, everything. You know, Siobhan said about the first years coming in here to third level, and they're making mistakes and they're having to solve them. We now have that going on in our junior and senior infant classrooms, where they've made the mistake of forgetting to make him turn left before they press the next button, or they've made the mistake of not pressing the button enough times, so he's only gone 2 spaces and then he's turned too early. You know, all of this. They're doing that at that level. They're rubbing out the thing on their little whiteboards. They're replanning. They're discussing it. So they're thinking in groups. There's huge teamwork going on. There's all kinds of stuff going on there that is absolutely... This software developer, when he was writing, he was saying, you know, what my wife and I do with our child is we have him bake, and he has to figure out the best way to use the circular cookie cutter so that he can get the most out of the dough, and so on and so forth. I mean, those are no more those skills I don't think are any more valuable than the problem solving skills the children are using when they're using the concrete materials to learn coding.
They're actually the same skills, really.
The very same. One, you know, he mentions also you know, a chair that had a bit of a loose screw, and then they ended up taking it apart and putting it back together. We do, that's like makey for all the world. Yeah. There you are, and you're trying to put the bits together to decide what you can play. We saw the children engage in such an enthusiastic manner. They were really hyped with everything we did regarding coding, and they love it, and they just want more, and they want to move faster, which is why we moved quite quickly away from the hour of code. You know, it was frankly too boring for them after a while, because they were just really getting going.
They were hungry for it.
I'm quite an advocate for the hour code, because we've been involved in it for years. But it's a lovely first step. But it's it'll get you on the path, but that's about it then. It kind of runs out a road fairly quickly.
Yeah, and I think maybe we could get more out of it if we used it with a younger group. So we've had this discussion, doing our own little bits of problem solving, because we're planning for a kind of a whole school tech plan, you know, and Brenda's been in with us now as well, and you know, we've all kinds of little schemes going on, haven't we?
Definitely.
And Brenda, because you're involved with developing a kind of a tech hub,
yes.
is it now? Maybe you could explain what this is. Tech hub, not as a kind of an entrepreneurial effort.
No. No, Tech Hub our vision is to have a Tech Hub for the Southeast. There are other secondary schools in Ireland that have developed Tech Hubs. And for me, I'm involved in one in Newtown School in Waterford. And we have a small committee of voluntary people, and there's been a significant amount of fundraising. But our vision is to have a creative space. Our idea is similar or modelled on Microsoft Dreamspace in Dublin. And it would be a space where initially students in Newtown would be able to come and engage in a 10-week programme, an after-school club, to interact and use devices, Spheros, Makey-Makeys, Arduinos, drones eventually, all sorts of things that would get them problem solving, giving them projects to work on, things to create using technology, but surrounding that with creative thinking, design, many, many different aspects, and bringing in the curriculum as well from history, geography, music, so that it would be integrated within the school as well. Now, the second part of the vision, which is bigger, and we would hope by year 2 to do this, is to have the space available for the Southeast. So for primary schools and secondary schools to come in and use the space and use the equipment, that it would be open to all and perhaps do things like equivalent of tech talks, parents, hold events. And so that's what we're working on at the moment. We're hoping to open in January, starting with a 10-week programme for students in Newtown, and then drive it forward from there.
There's an interesting one there. I think that's a great idea. I'm not just trying to plumose you by saying that, but talking to other friends of mine who are teachers or involved in schools, and I don't know, Kate, you might have some thoughts on this, or anyone who's been involved in schools. Often schools get money from the department for tech. So they buy computers, or they buy something, and it's just, what do we do with it now? It can be a bit.
They're very frightened.
But it gets kind of boiled down into this kind of hardware software divide, and it's all integrated. It's a continuum as such. You can have, if you've got hardware but nothing to do on it, it's just plastic and stuff. Whereas if you have software but nothing to run it on, well, it's just abstract ideas. And really, you need the whole thing together.
Yeah, you need, and I suppose for schools, they have to think of their digital policy now in terms of how are they going to integrate digital aspects within the classroom, within the curriculum. And first, certainly in some schools' approach, their first approach is to get devices for the teachers, because teachers aren't necessarily technical. Kate is great that she has technical interest and enthusiasm. Not all teachers are going to have that, and so there is a real learning curve and a fear, I guess, associated to using digital devices or bring it into the classroom.
I mean, to be fair to teachers, it'd be like if I had to go out and suddenly start coaching a hurling team.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have a clue.
Absolutely.
I'd be lost.
Absolutely.
So I'm not trying to.
You have to have the supports there. You have to have the curriculum as well. Certainly for many of these, so Makey, Sphero, Arduino, and many others, the microbits as well. There's huge resources online, kits that have full lesson plans. They tell you exactly what to do, how to do it. The programming is there for much of it, and you can extend it or you can write your own. Like the Makey banana piano we did, that exists. We just have to plug the wires in and go to that game.
I'm going to put a tweet. I put a tweet up the other day when we were recording this podcast, and I included a small 12-second clip from the demo last week.
Very
and
good.
it's one of our third-year students who's a mature student. He's a parent. He was like, I want to do this.
Yeah.
So I'll have to put up a link to
Love
the Makey. The program is freely available online. It's steady. But the important thing there is the Makey kits and the Spheros, the hardware. Okay, you have to pay for that, but they're all relatively cheap. I mean, a Sphero mini robot is about 50 quid ish.
60, yeah.
How much is a Makey kit?
About 70, I think it is. But if you're using them with iPads, you need to get a USB adapter, and that can be about €40.
Yes, but if you can use it with an old laptop,
if you can use it with a laptop,
fine.
it's just the kit you have to buy.
But I mean, they're relatively inexpensive. You're not talking about thousands of euros in investment. I might want to shift the conversation ever so slightly now, because this is based on the conversation that we were having earlier on, Siobhan, which was about computer science education as opposed to technology or computers used in education. And Frank, you might actually be a good person to go to on this, because you have kids you have kids in primary school and secondary school, okay?
Yes.
And there's an ongoing debate, and the jury's out on this, but people, we have to get devices into schools and books, and we'll replace the books with ebooks. And what we're talking about is not that. We're talking about computer science education, not let's have everything on a tablet or a laptop or anything like that. And I think that's an important distinction to make. I mean, have you got much experience with technology in the classroom as a parent?
As a parent?
Yeah.
technology in my kids' respect. In respect
Yeah,
to them,
I was
being
expecting
into it.
them using it, and maybe any reflections that you might have on it.
As far as I can see, anyway, their exposure to technology in the classroom is very much like using apps. There's nothing going on like we were talking about up to now. Nothing going on like we would do in CodeDojo. It might be just using packages like Microsoft Word or Microsoft PowerPoint or things like that. So it's actually just like using applications to create documents or things like that. But they're not actually doing computer science, I feel. Anyway, no, and there's no avenue certainly for the older kids. Now there was one teacher out there a couple of years ago who was running a class after school that was doing computer science, teaching programming, doing various things using Raspberry Pis, things like that. But that was on his own time.
Yeah.
That wasn't part of what they were doing in school. So that's their experience of technology as far as I can see. Now in primary, my kids in primary, every now and then, like Siobhan is doing, every now and then somebody comes in. It might be me sometimes, or it might be somebody else comes in and they do a class on Scratch, usually. Nothing cool like this. Makey it seems brilliant, but nothing like that yet. So they're getting a little bit of exposure to it in the classroom, but that's piecemeal. That's only every now and then. You know.
Well, on that note, and as a teacher, the curriculum is so heavily loaded. It's extremely hard to fit those in. You're always trying to integrate everything with everything else. So even, despite my high interest in this area, I can never fit in enough of this kind of thing. And it unfortunately does tend to be, the time that Siobhan and I will plan between us and we'll say, at this point of the year, this is what we're going to do. And unfortunately, it's just the reality of it. You're always trying to cover everything, and you're always trying to give them the extra experiences where you bring them to engineering week, you bring them to science week, you bring them to maths week, and so you're trying to do it. You can't always be actually. It would be lovely. It would be really good to be able to plan an hour of coding every week or to fit it in that sense. But the time just isn't there for teachers.
I agree with you there. And I've talked to a few teachers and they've said exactly what you said. Is the curriculum is both in secondary and in primary. It's
overloaded.
So it
absolutely.
Really is, there's no space for it at the moment.
Sure, it's the same for us as well.
Yeah.
I mean, if we wanted to go off on a tangent in a module, you often go, oh God, but I've only got a few weeks and I've got to get X, Y, and Z covered. Maybe can't go down this road here. But that's a kind of a larger, more societal problem.
Yeah. Now, I will say that the Waterford Teachers Centre is brilliant. They have lots of things. For example, they have the BBOTs. So what you do is you say, I'm going to do a little bit of coding. We're going to do coding in the school at this point of the year. Even if you can do that, even if it's only the bare minimum, it's a fantastic thing to do. Do a little intervention, as it were, do a block of it for a week or 2 weeks or whatever. You can get the BBOTs and various things from the Teacher Centre, borrow them. So again, like in terms of budget, we have got a nice bit of funding in recent years, and even if the schools can get their iPads together or their computers and then they borrow the likes of the BBOTs, the Waterford Teacher Centre is amazing for things like that. You can actually say to them, we'd love more BBOTs, we'd love more of this. They have Isaac 9. They do everything they can to promote STEM in schools and all of those things, and they listen to teachers when they say we'd like more, and they then try to fund that so that the schools have the facility to borrow. So
one of the things that we try to do in our CodeDojo is the ethos that we have is we try to make it so that everything with the kids and devices is not one way, so that they're not just consumers of content on the device, so that they're, as long as they're putting something back into it, whatever that might be, we don't really mind. Because we found, and again, Frank, you might have some thoughts on this, we find that when we're doing programming, it becomes like school. And it's a Saturday afternoon thing for us. So it has to be kind of a bit of crack and a bit of fun. And if it's not, it's the kids' weekend as well. They have to have a break too. So one of the things that we've found great, one of the biggest hits that we had, say, last year with CodeDojo was stop motion animation. We got weeks out of it. They loved it. They absolutely loved it. So setting up phones and tablets, and the software we want to use is free, and they got to bring in their toys and, you know, make little kind of animations with it, and then another day we came in with some microphones and they put some sound to it, and they just loved it. But what was really good about that was, okay, the first session was just chaos, you know, but then the second session they were really thinking about the story that they wanted to tell, because with stop motion animation you have to, you know, you make a small movement, take a picture, make another small movement, take a picture. Oh, it's brilliant crack.
And there's some amazing movies out there then that you can show them as well. Kubo and the Two Strings.
Yeah.
Oh, what an amazing movie. So there's a lot of stuff like that you can do then to promote that interest even further.
Frank?
Yeah, I'd agree entirely with you there, Rob, because in the CodeDojo I'm in, we make a conscious effort for it to be not like anything like school. Yeah. So we orientate the desks so that they're circular, so everybody's facing one another. We don't follow week on week a program or a curriculum per se. We don't want them sort of working off typing in a sheet of code and then press and go and it works and not understanding it. We like them to, like you were talking about before, make mistakes and then start talking and collaborating with one another and trying to get things done, you know. Yeah. But one thing we found really good for that, as well as you talked about, like not just be a consumer, we switch off the Wi-Fi. Because you know the temptation is there for them, for some of the kids, like they'll start watching something on YouTube and then the other kids will start watching it. Before you know, you'll have like 6 or 7 kids watching something on YouTube, and that's fine for a little while, but like we want them to be creative and things like that. So we can turn off the Wi-Fi when we were in the race course in Tramore. We could turn off the Wi-Fi, but I could also just kind of hand it out if some of the volunteers needed it, maybe to download some software or something. We kind of kept a tight rein on it. But we found it really worked well, because then they started doing stuff themselves, started producing. Yeah.
Just something that Frank said there reminded me of another thing that the article I read was saying. He was saying that when you just teach the syntax, there's nothing to say that it's not messy. It might work, but there's nothing to say that it's nice code to work with and to follow and to use. And the way we're teaching it as block coding, that really works in, I feel anyway, I think Siobhan will probably agree that when we're looking at that, we need it to be neat and tidy, and we have to, you know, the children have to learn as they go along that if they're going to, if they don't create the right loops, if they don't, they're going to get a very messy looking code on their screen in front of them. And so they find ways to tighten it all up, to neaten it all up and so on. And again, that's, you know, that's promoting the skills of having pride in your work, you know, and just perfectionism of sorts. Not that we want all our children to be striving for perfection the whole time, but you know, just taking pride in what they do and to do it as best they can, and not just throw out anything it might work but it's sloppy. We want it to work and be the best that it can be as well.
So to coming to the end of the podcast now, so to try to summarize what we've been talking about, I mean, we're all relatively enthusiastic about kids learning some computer science skills, whatever they may be, but really I think we've largely focused on problem solving, not necessarily, you know, Kotlin syntax or anything like that. We're not really that interested in that. It's more about kind of thinking about how you might approach a problem. I think they call it, metacognition. Is that the official phrase?
Sounds good though.
It sounds very fancy. I have no idea. It could be something completely different. No, it's about where you're aware of your thought process and you become aware of the way that you're approaching an issue. I think you think I'd be metacognizant of my own language. Anyway, but we're talking. So what we would recommend is any sort of skill or activity that involves problem solving or planning or having to work something out in advance. Preferably if it has some tactile element to it, so that it's not abstract and entirely locked into a computer screen, particularly for younger kids, so primary school age, particularly, I mean, junior age, really, it would have to be. And then the kind of the older primary school kids. And then into secondary school, I don't have too much experience with older teenagers, but certainly I found on our own CodeDojo, as we make the switch to something that's more text heavy, where they're typing a lot, that's where they just switch off, because it becomes I suppose it becomes like college. It becomes like a class because they have to. It's a lot of
Yeah.
work, you know. So maybe that's not a thing to do. We're a big fan. Excuse me, now I have the plague, so I've been coughing away in the background all throughout the podcast. We always kind of a fan of cooking analogies here on the machine, and in that article that Kate has been referencing, he does talk about baking and baking with his kids, which we've all done. And I was just, it kind of reminded me of something my own kids who go to CodeDojo and kind of into all this stuff, but they're kind of agnostic about it. It's a bit of crack, but you know, don't really care too much about it. But they're mad into baking. And I remember one time one of the older girls, she was maybe during the summer, she wanted to go off and bake some cakes, and she went off and she baked, but she wasn't really following the recipe properly because she'd done it before and she thought she knew everything, and she forgot to put sugar into the cakes. They were horrible. They were manky. They were rotten. And I just thought it was interesting. Whereas last night because they had a cake sale in the school today. So last night the two of them were making some cakes, and before they began, they made sure they had all of the ingredients lined up. They were going through the list and getting everything and making sure all it was. And if you think about it, that's kind of problem solving skills, in that they've learned from the experience before of forgetting the sugar, get everything together, and now we follow the steps and we do our cakes, and they turned out lovely actually. So yeah, happy days.
I don't see any cake here, Rod.
Well, it was gone to the school. I'll buy you a cake afterwards. You're all right. Right. So what we might do is, as I put this up, I put out. I'll send out some links on the tweet at machine_podcast, also Machine Podcast on Facebook, with some links to maybe some of these resources that we've been referencing, to Scratch Junior, some of the Makey kits, all of those type of things. Bebots, yeah, we can put out some images of those. I put up the video of the banana piano because I just love it, and a link to the code for that. Next week it is EU Coding Week. Siobhan, Brenda and I will be in Waterford City Library someday next week. I can't remember when it is because I have. Is it Monday? Is it
Monday?
I can't remember. I'll put it up on the tweet.
1:45.
I'll look it up and okay, thank you. You think I would know that? But we'll put up a tweet that we'll be in the library. We'll be demonstrating some of the kit, and then I'll be doing a talk about the hour code as a kind of a starter, as a gateway drug to later on in the week as well. And that's aimed specifically for teachers as something they can do to get going on it straight away. Thank you for listening to The Machine. Please leave us a rating on iTunes, 5 stars please. We don't want any 1-star reviews because that really isn't helpful. We're available in all the usual places, and if you like what you hear, tell your friends, and if you don't, keep your mouth shut.
Whenever you're ready.
Is that a robot voice?
Yeah, I get when I get nervous, I talk like this.
We brought Stephen Hawkins along.
Okay.
Do we have to be really serious?